Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Subnet Show. I'm your host, Gabriel Cardona. I'm coming to you live and direct from San Francisco, where last night I was in Oakland. I got to see the amazing Kendrick Lamar show. It was absolutely wonderful. I took my 13-year-old son, who also likes Kendrick. I've been to probably 1,000 concerts in my life. I spent most of my 20s going around and doing music. And this was truly one of the best concerts I've ever seen. So if you happen to be a hip hop fan or a modern music fan and you're not dialed into Kendrick Lamar yet, you should check him out. I think we're witnessing like one of the greats in their creative prime. So let's get that out of the way. We're joined as always by my amazing co-host, the man, the myth, the legend, the man with the most cats in crypto, Connor Daly. What is up, my friend?
It's rare that I feel like I have musical experiences to talk about that I feel like, other people have. I actually saw Kendrick Lamar in concert 9 years ago.
Nice. Wow. I saw him in 17.
uh,
You saw him that long ago. My God.
yeah, yeah. I have to say, I really didn't like that concert.
Where was it? Do you remember?
It was at Cornell. It was actually we have our like spring fling at the end of the year, and they bring in concerts. And my freshman year, they brought in
How big? It must have been
Kendrick
small, right? A
Lamar.
couple hundred?
What?
Size wise, a couple hundred
How many
people?
people were there? I mean, the whole undergraduate class and graduate people as well. So I would say like uh 18,000 people
Oh,
probably.
so it's huge. 9 years ago, it was already 17,000. Okay, that's big. So do you think it's because your taste isn't just into hip hop or it was a bad show?
I actually didn't think he was that great of a performer. I mean, I actually really like Kendrick Lamar now. I listen to a lot of his music, and yeah, like he still had like swimming pools and stuff back then. I don't remember if it was before or after Mad City.
Hmm.
So I mean, I still actually really like his music, but I just thought he was a little bit like, I'm Kendrick Lamar, worship me.
Sure.
Which I have the strong opinion that if you go into a show and you don't know a person's music, a good performer will still be able to win you over. And I didn't really feel like I was won over that show. Is I've been to some other concerts that I just feel like the actual it had a lot more charm.
Hmm.
But I actually do really like Kendrick's music, and I would totally go again. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think he is, yeah, incredibly talented. So not my
Yeah.
favorite concert of all time, but I still enjoy it. Still have fond memories. I actually liked Hoodie Allen that day a little bit better. We had a couple people in a row,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it was a fun one.
Yeah, it was good. I got to spend it with my son, which is a special memory. And it was amazing concert. So, it's obviously the best concert he's ever seen. So good special memory, if nothing else. So today we are joined by a very, very special guest, somebody I have known now for probably 4 years at least. Time flies in the crazy crypto land, but I would say since, yeah, 2018-ish, that's about 4 years. So we are joined by, he has many claims to fame, going all the way back to Truffle plugin verify and Truffle plugin assertions, I believe. He also worked on a language called CashScript, which we're going to talk about, Revoke.Cash. He has his own startup that he's been doing recently. So many different places that we'll touch upon. He was on my team at Bitcoin.com, but we're joined by a very, very amazing computer scientist and engineer, one of the best in the blockchain space, in my opinion. Rosco Kalis. What is up, my friend?
Hey, well, that's quite an intro. Thanks so much, Gabriel.
Yeah,
Nice
I
to be
mean it.
here.
I mean it. So let me give the background how we met, and of course you can fill in where I get this wrong. So around 2017, 2018 is when I had my startup Bitbox, and it ended up at Bitcoin.com, where I was the director of developer services. And at the time, we were teaming up with Bitmain, which of course is Jihan Wu's mining rig company out of Beijing, and we were doing a series of hackathons all over the world. So Bitcoin.com would basically fund and set up the hackathons, and then Bitmain would come in with like investment resources, and so they had an investment team there. And if you were good enough, you could potentially get some funds. And so we did a series of hackathons. We did one in San Francisco. That's actually the first place I met Goon in person, was in San Francisco. And then we did one in Amsterdam, which is where Roscoe's from. It's a crazy place to grow up. And so his team actually won at the time. So at the time, one of the reasons Bitbox absolutely blew up, I think I've told people before, but after 8 weeks, that had been downloaded in 110 different countries. So it was just like the right idea at the right time. And part of it was that there was nobody yet creating developer tooling for Bitcoin Cash. So it was kind of just like the lack of developer tooling and the fact that I poured so much passion and quality into this one product caused it to blow up. But there were still, some things that weren't perfect, and there was still opportunity to do developer tooling. And if you guys know about Truffle and Hard Hat, those are kind of like the two big ones in Ethereum that I can think of, Truffle being the one at the time. So Roscoe's team, he connected with a couple other people in Amsterdam, and they created what was called Panda Cash, and it was basically like truffle for Bitcoin Cash. I think is kind of a good way to give the elevator pitch. And it ended up winning. It was very, very good, and they won that hackathon. And so I ended up being in contact with Roscoe. And then later he hit me up and was like, "Hey, I'm looking to do an internship for, I believe it was your final year at school, correct?" He was getting a degree.
Yeah,
What college was it?
that was for my master's at University of Amsterdam,
Right.
which was a software engineering program.
Yeah. So I had already been tossing around this idea in my mind, or the community at large had been saying there's no Bitcoin Cash needs smart contracts. And if you've ever worked in the Bitcoin ecosystem, you kind of got to like graft on tokens, and you've got to graft on smart contracts. It's all a little bit of a hack, but you can kind of make it work if you're clever. And he's very clever. So I pitched him the idea, hey, you should do a smart contract language for Bitcoin Cash. We should call it Cash Script. That was the name we were tossing around. And I will admit, I didn't have any idea. I certainly didn't think it should look like Solidity. But Roscoe, having already been a very accomplished Solidity engineer at the time, came in with the idea of, hey, let's sort of copy the paradigm of Solidity, where you have a contract abstraction, and you can do pragmas and require statements, and it looks and feels just like Solidity in the context of sort of the stack Bitcoin script language. And so he created what's called Cash Script, which I will show here on my screen in a second, the website. And it's basically like a smart contract language for Bitcoin Cash. And that's what he did as his, I don't know if it was your final project or your internship to get his master's, but it's been, I think of it as very successful. It's definitely the best smart contract language in the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. So that's basically how we met each other. And then he came to Amsterdam to live in Tokyo for what, 3 or 4 months? How long were you ultimately there? Longer than that?
Yeah, it was about 4 months, and then after that, I had to go back to Amsterdam for like the presentation of the whole Cash Script project.
Right. Yeah, so I guess so we can start there. We can go through all of that. So we want to talk about your crypto journey and your crypto vision. So I guess let's start in the beginning. You started doing computer science when in high school? Did you grow up writing code? Dad's an amazing artist as well. I know you've been doing an NFT project with your dad, who's like a physical artist. So I don't know if that inspired you. If you want to sort of talk about how you got into computer science and creativity and that kind of thing.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't say that I'm one of those people that really like grew up programming. I did grow up very like interested in computers and like video games and all those kinds of things that young boys like. But at the time, like, I don't know, I always felt like programming was just too complicated, which is kind of funny. It's not that complicated actually, but I just never really dove into it that much. So I did actually for a while. I worked together with a classmate in high school on like a video game that we were making, but actually he was doing all the programming and I was making the drawings, like the artworks for the game, which was very cool. I guess that
I remember this. It had a crazy name.
that.
What was the name?
Well, the name of the game was Unicell.
So
But like that was just something that was yeah, it would be funny if my classmate is watching this. But yeah, we tried to build that build that game. That I guess that's my first experience with the wonders of the digital world. We never launched that or finished it, but it was definitely fun. And then yeah, at some point I started I went to university and figured I wanted to sort of do more with computers and study computer science, which was really nice. It was a lot of fun, and basically from the start I started doing side projects. So we were learning programming in school, and then other like math and whatnot. And then I remember that for one of the first classes that we had, it was called programming languages, and we were doing just a bunch of different programming languages where it was like 1 week per language. And for one of the weeks, we had to make a Minesweeper clone using Lua. And I was having so much fun with that. Like I think I was done with the main assignment in a day or so, which had like a whole checklist. And then I just started creating my own sound effects for the game and creating my own like hand-drawn shitty artwork for the game, which was which I enjoyed most. And then from there, I kind of I figured, now I know how to make a game with this language. Let's make more games. And that's kind of what I did. None of them ever like finished, but that's kind of like where I started also like developing side projects and sort of programming as a hobby. So yeah, fast forward a few years, and I'm at the end of my bachelor's degree, and I find out about like blockchain and Ethereum.
So you found out about
Bitcoin.
Ethereum before. Which did you find, Bitcoin or Ethereum first?
Well, of course I had heard of Bitcoin before. I think I was in high school when Bitcoin came out, and I guess I did hear about it pretty early back then. But yeah, I was like a 15-year-old high schooler, so I was like, I don't get it. And then at the end of my bachelor's in which was in 2017, during the 2017 bull run, I kind of got reintroduced to crypto through Ethereum, because like I had heard of Bitcoin before, but then I heard about this thing called Ethereum, and it has like smart contracts, and you can do all these kinds of crazy things like decentralized exchanges and whatever. You can make whatever you want. And of course, me being a computer science student and like a software engineer, that is what excited me. Well, I guess more than the idea of just a currency. Especially also because I really hadn't looked into any kind of the sort of economic reasons behind like having cryptocurrency. And so then I got started learning Solidity, and yeah, there you have one of the, well, actually the first project that I did, Truffle Assertions, which essentially I started learning Solidity, and I used Truffle for that, which was and is one of the biggest like frameworks for developing smart contracts.
How long was it before Hard Hat came out? Was Truffle around for a couple of years, or was Hard Hat out quickly?
No, yeah, Truffle has been around for
Truffle is like definitely
long.
significantly older. It was out in like 2016, 2017, I think. And then Hard Hat wasn't always Hard Hat. It used to be called Builder. I'm not sure when it came out, but I think that was closer probably to like 2019, 2020. But I am guessing, I'm not fact checked that. Maybe I'll look that up real quick.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but yeah, like I think that Builder came out in like 2019, like you said, something like that. So yeah, like Hard Hat has obviously grown a lot in a relatively short time. Mm-hmm. But yeah, one thing I noticed is there was really no way to unit test certain things in smart contracts. And Googling gave me some solutions, but one thing that I always find interesting about Stack Overflow, and also just like in general sort of the programming community, then what I would find on Stack Overflow for these questions was, oh yeah, you know, you just add these 100 lines of code, you copy paste that over to your yeah, to like a utils file or something like that, and then you use that. And then I just think, oh, if you need that much code, then why isn't this like a library? So like obviously someone had already like multiple people had already thought about this issue, and they all thought, okay, I will just write this code myself, and then I will answer on the Stack Overflow question that they should copy paste this code. And so I kind of like extended on that and sort of made the code that they shared in Stack Overflow like a bit more flexible. And then turn that into sort of like a library that should be used together with Truffle, like if you're unit testing things with Truffle. So yeah, that's the first thing I made, and then from there, I sort of, like you said, after that, I did the
Verify?
hackathon.
Or
No,
did you,
first
was assertions
the
then
verify.
verify? Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, so the truffle assertions is what I did first, and then after that actually came the hackathon where you and I met.
Oh, okay. Got it.
And so they're like coming from sort of this Ethereum ecosystem, which at the time, like it definitely was still early in tooling, and there definitely wasn't that much as you know, evidenced by me having to write this assertions library.
Mhm.
But it was still like way ahead of what Bitcoin.Cash had, and actually that hackathon was also my first introduction to like just Bitcoin.Cash in general. Of course, I also had heard of that and like of the whole fork.
And did it
But I've
feel
never
like,
worked with it.
was your initial reaction to working with script like horror after working with something as good as the EVM? Did it feel like just a step backwards?
Yeah, definitely. Like it definitely felt like a step backward in the sense that, yeah, like everything is just harder to do and also harder to reason about, and just in general more limited.
Mhm.
And then and yeah, but like I think my main pain point was just the lack of tooling at the time. And then at that hackathon, I was just like, okay, well, I don't have the tooling that I need to make things. So then that will be the hackathon project that we build, will be that tooling.
When's the last time you saw this site?
Yeah, I'm very surprised that that's still online actually.
Yeah.
Nice archaeology. Yeah, so that's yeah, so essentially what we built was sort of like a ganache, which is part of the Truffle suite of tooling. We built that for Bitcoin.Cash, which is, yeah, like in my opinion, really invaluable if you're building any kind of application that you can test it locally. So yeah,
So I guess
like
a question I
yeah.
have. So I guess just really quickly. So if anybody doesn't know, so Ganache is a blockchain visualizer. So it's like a GUI tool that shows you when new blocks come in, like what transactions like happen in which blocks. So if you're like testing your dApp, you can kind of see transactions as they come in. But I guess one thing I was kind of confused about for like Bitcoin.Cash, because like Bitcoin.Cash I know is very similar to Bitcoin. It has multiple editions on it, but like how are you actually writing these like smart contracts? Because I know Bitcoin script is like famously very limited, and it is not a Turing complete language. You can't do loops in it. And so yeah, so I guess like how did you do cash script? Like how is that like kind of built on top of it? Like how can you do smart contracts in Bitcoin.Cash? I say this because I'm very much a Bitcoin.Cash noob and don't know much about it.
Makes
Here
a lot of sense.
Here you can see the syntax real quick. So it looks just like Truffle. Go for it, Rosco Kalis.
Yeah, so yeah, so basically after that whole hackathon, I got in touch with Gabriel, like you mentioned before, that we to sort of do my my master's project with him, and then he came up with this idea of doing a high level smart contract language. And back at that time, there had just been implemented like a few new features for Bitcoin-Cash script language that actually did allow certain kind of interesting smart contracts to be built on top of it. And I'm not sure how deep we should go into sort of like the technical details of that, but
Oh, people are interested. Go as deep as you
Yeah,
can.
I agree.
cool. Yeah. So then there's this technique called covenants, which has been around for quite a while, and is pretty well known in just the regular Bitcoin world as well. And if I'm not mistaken, didn't Emin Gün also write the original Bitcoin governance paper? That's something you guys should know, right?
I don't
If
actually.
I
Yeah, I'm not sure if
if
you
I
I'm not
if
familiar with that
I
word. Covenants.
covenant.
if I
Yeah.
recall, wait, let me just Google that real quick.
Mhm.
But yeah, or wait, maybe someone else can Google it. But yeah, so there was this Bitcoin paper called Bitcoin Governance, which, if I recall correctly, was written by Emin and some other people, which basically describes a way to extend Bitcoin scripts and Bitcoin based contracts.
Yeah, okay, I
The,
see. Yes, this was Bitcoin covenants. Yeah, there's
yes,
three authors on the paper. Yeah, Malta Moser, Itai Ayal, and Emin Günsir. So yeah, Gun and Itai were from Cornell, and I'm not
cool.
familiar with Malta.
Yeah, so one of the biggest limiting factors in Bitcoin script is that it's essentially a yes or a no. So you execute this smart contract, and at the end it will tell you yes, you can send money, or no, you cannot send money. But you can't say something like, okay, yes, you can send money, but only to these addresses, or only when you meet these other requirements. And there are some requirements that you can already set, like age time locking that has been in Bitcoin for a while.
Yeah, this is basically how Bitcoin script works. Is yeah, it's a function that has to answer the question of, can is this transaction allowed? Can you send money? And normally the way it works is there's a standard function that everybody uses to check if the signature of the incoming UTXOs is valid. And if it is, then you can do then it's legal. You could also do things like multi-sig, like have our multiple these multiple signatures valid? Do we have enough signatures? You could also there's also the op return code, which you can just use to just return no, it's not valid. And yeah, so it's some cool stuff like that. But so it sounds like, yes, this covenant helps you get a little bit more sophisticated. So can you actually just store like state for like storing variables and stuff over time?
Right. So the short answer is no. Which is I would say the main limiting factor is that you cannot store any states. But these covenants do allow you to have some of the benefits that you would have with like an actual stateful a VM like the EVM. Because these covenants allow you to essentially say things like, okay, well, you are allowed to send X amount of money to X address, and then Y amount of money to some other address. So you're able to add like more sophisticated checks to that. And one of the things that you can then do is sort of simulate a state. And what I mean by that is that you can always store some variables inside Bitcoin scripts, but you can never change it again. So that is why it's not really stateful, even though you can store values. But you can store those values in a next smart contract, essentially. So what you can do is you can say, okay, I have this value. Let's say you're keeping track of a token balance for some account, and this value is set to 1. Like, oh, this person has one of these tokens. Then what you could do with governance is basically send all the money that is locked inside this smart contract to a new smart contract where the value is 2 instead of 1. And that is like, for a lot of use cases, that's a very convoluted way of keeping track of state. So there are some interesting use cases that you could build around that, but in general, I would still say that the main thing that you would do with Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash smart contracts is stateless.
Even it's worth noting, though, I don't have any examples here, but if anybody's familiar with what it actually looks like to write script, the scripting language of Bitcoin Cash, it's stack based and it's opcodes, and it is hyper awkward to work with. If you're used to working with any high level language, which all of us are, we all came of age in the modern time programming. If you work with Python or JavaScript or Golang or whatever, when you see script, it feels like you're working with Forth from the 60s or something. And so even having just this abstraction, being able just to hide it behind the contracts abstraction with some functions and some high level data types and control flow and all this stuff is such a huge leap forward, that even though you don't get the full breadth of this state and Turing completeness and everything you get with EVM, it's still a massive leap forward for sharing code and having a smart contract community spring up in the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. It's still a huge win. Like, you can't.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I have done some work in Bitcoin like way back in the day, and this is so much cleaner and looks already like so much easier to use. It's very, very impressive.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you've ever worked with like assembly, it's like working with assembly. You have your like opcode that you want to do, and then you have to like kind of like order your arguments, and it's all about, you have a stack, you push things onto the stack, you pop them off the stack. So if you're not even familiar with that, with what that looks like, just from me describing it, you don't want to know. Consider yourself lucky.
And you wrote this in how long? Like a month? You did this pretty quickly. A month, 2 months, something?
Yeah, it was actually super quick, because I think probably the biggest part of it was done in a month. And then there's always a lot of improvements to be made. So over the course of the year that followed, I added a bunch of extra abstractions and more sort of like syntactical sugar that makes the whole sort of experience even better.
You wrote a compiler in like a month?
Yeah, essentially. But the nice thing about that compiler, or like the nice thing from an implementation perspective, is that Bitcoin script is not Turing complete, so that you don't really need to support things like function calls and loops and a lot of things that make a compiler more complex than just than what it is right now. Don't get me wrong, it was still a lot of work to build like a full compiler in a relatively short amount of time.
In college, I wrote one as well for a class with like, there was like three people on my team, and it took us all semester working very hard. Like, I think there was like 6 projects. Some of the ones are towards the end were like more like optimizations based. But we were easily putting in like, I alone was putting in at least like 60 plus hours per project.
Damn, yeah.
And yeah, for like 6 or 7 of them, that's more than a month's worth of work.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I think like in total, there have been many more months spent on cash crypts besides that initial month.
And so
But
that was Cash Script. So
yeah.
that was the contribution to the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. But while he was at Bitcoin.com and working with my developer on my team, on the developer relations team, he continued doing Ethereum, and he's had this project as well. So when did Revoke come into focus?
Yeah, that's an interesting question as well, because like I said, like we discussed, I moved to Tokyo for a while I was working on cash crypts with you over at Bitcoin.com, and then after that I started traveling a bit more, and mainly in Asia. And then at some point I attended DevCon, which was in Osaka, and there I discussed sort of this problem of ERC20 allowances with Paul Berg, who is the creator of Sablier, which is like a money streaming platform on Ethereum. And he gave this presentation at DevCon about these allowances and how he actually had a bug in a test version of Sablier that would potentially put everyone's like funds in their wallets at risk because of these allowances.
Do you want to explain what an allowance is in context of ERC20?
Yes. So essentially, when you have these smart contracts, like EVM-based smart contracts, they can do basically anything you can think of. So in case of Uniswap or Pangolin, like for example, swapping tokens, right? And Ethereum has this concept of making a function payable. So that means that you can include some ETH. You can send ETH along with that transaction. So for example, if you wanted to swap ETH or of course AVAX, like the native token for like some ERC20 token, then you can all do that all in one transaction. But there's no sort of payable option for ERC20 tokens. So there's no way to send ERC20 tokens together with like a function call. And to mitigate that, or sort of to solve that problem, the ERC20 standard has this concept of an allowance. And what you do with that is that you give an allowance to some other address or some smart contract to take money out of your wallet. And then essentially the rest of the functionality inside the smart contract will be the same, except that they can then they can pool money from your wallet rather than you having to send it to them. And in that way, you can not only swap ETH to DAI, but you can also swap DAI to ETH, for example. But as you can imagine,
I was gonna say, this is all through the transfer from method. If you ever look at like the ERC20 standard or the NFT 721 standard, basically, yeah, you just say the allowances you're able to set. I'm going to let the smart contract move up to $1 million of my money, and so for up to $1 million, it can take that out of your wallet. So that's really great as long as the app is doing exactly what you expect and it doesn't get hacked. But the problems can happen if the site is like a rug pull or there's just a breach of the smart contract and there's a hack, then potentially the site could take everything up to that $1 million. So, it's useful to have a large allowance when you want to like be on a DEX and you want to be able to make large trades. but you don't necessarily want to leave that forever. So what does Revoke actually do? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like you said, as you can imagine, giving access to your wallet can be pretty dangerous. Giving someone access. So essentially, what after talking to Paul at DEF CON, I figured, this can be a pretty big problem. And at that point, there weren't really any hacks or exploits that had happened. But I figured I would make this platform called Revoke.Cash, which essentially gives you an overview of all your allowances that you have approved over your entire on-chain lifetime, and give you the option to revoke them. And so essentially, then you can sort of visit that website every once in a while, every week or every month, depending how often you do things on chain, and then sort of see, oh, do I still need these allowances? Do I recognize these allowances? Is this sort of like, are all these allowances still necessary? And if the answer is no, then it's usually a good practice to just revoke the ones that you don't really need anymore. Just to make sure that, if something happens down the line with those platforms, like they get hacked or turn out to be a rug pull, like you said, they can't actually take any money from your wallet.
Yeah, these allowances are kind of a necessary evil, like you said, of like, you have to do them to make the sites work. But most of the sites aren't good caretakers. And also it's kind of an annoying thing of, you have to pay gas if you want to adjust the allowance. So do you want to have to do an extra transaction before every swap you make? You could do that. And if you do that, you would never be at risk outside of the risk of one transaction of having this happen to you. But it's kind of annoying UI. Users don't really like it. You also have to pay double the fees because this is a state updating transaction. So it isn't going to be entirely cheap. So it's kind of annoying. So what can you do about it instead? So what most UI developers do is they just basically set the allowance to be unlimited, some very high number, so that you'll never have to hit approve twice, which is, good for the usability, but just bad because a very large number is bigger than basically everybody's wallet. You can just set it arbitrarily high. So, you'll never run out of money. So they could basically always steal all of your money at any given time. So it's kind of this trade-off. And Revoke is something that I have actually come across, many times I knew about. So, this is our first time meeting, but I definitely knew about your work from that. And so
cool.
It's definitely a very, very cool product in the ecosystem.
Yeah. And so I think one
does work with Avalanche if anybody is interested in trying it. Yes,
definitely. And one interesting thing actually that I've seen lately is that initially when I created Revoke, that there hadn't been any real hacks or whatever concerning allowances. Then at some point, like last year and also already a bit in 2020, some hacks started happening where allowance or where allowed funds were at risk. But now, mainly the last year, what we've seen a lot is actually phishing websites tricking users into signing allowances, which is something that I hadn't even considered when I created Revoke. The only thing that I considered back then is like, oh, these allowances, we have a lot of them. What if something goes wrong down the line? But I never considered like, oh, what if someone signs a malicious allowance from the get-go? And I think especially with sort of the rise of NFTs, that became a much bigger thing. Because before that, a phishing site can, rather than asking for an allowance for all of your money or all of your DAI, for example, they can ask or they can ask you to just transfer all the DAI. And if you're not looking what you're doing, then you will just approve that as well. So maybe that hadn't been like a very big concern. But then when we're looking at NFTs, you can only send one NFT at a time regularly. But if you give an allowance, then all of a sudden, all NFTs of that specific collection that you allowed are can potentially be transferred. So now, if I have like 5 Bored Apes in my wallet, and I sign one of these allowances on a phishing website, then they can take all 5 of my Bored Apes in the same transaction. So that's actually become a very big problem in the past year. And so recently, I've also released a Revoke.Cash browser extension that actually sort of monitors whatever is happening on a website, like whatever transactions they are, like the website is requesting. And if it is an approval, then we show a pop-up like, hey, you are about to approve an allowance. Are you sure that that's what you want to do? And if you get that kind of pop-up while you're actually trying to claim an airdrop, for example, then you should definitely think twice. Like, hey, claiming an airdrop definitely doesn't require me to give an approval for my 5 Bored Apes.
Hey, good idea.
That's pretty dastardly.
Yeah. So that's something that I launched about a month ago now. And since then there have been some other sort of similar scams that I'm also trying to prevent by adding additional warnings to the extension. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting to see how those scams evolve and like how all that works. But yeah, this Revoke extension works with any EVM chain, so definitely also works with Avalanche. Yeah, so that's definitely, if you are sort of also concerned about getting phished or getting scammed in sort of more of a direct way, then that extension can definitely help there.
Wow.
So
yeah,
what?
this is cool.
So this is really cool, and you say you're still working on it. So I'm just curious. So where are you at today? What is the majority of your work on now? Are you attached to a protocol or something, or are you independent?
So right now,
one more project that we wanted to bring up that he just went through. So maybe you can answer.
Yeah.
If you want to, however you want to answer that. But I definitely want to touch on that last thing you've been working.
Yeah. So I'll sort of touch upon the past year or so. So late last year, I started a startup with a friend of mine, Marwan, and we went through YC early this year with that startup.
That's Y Combinator.
And
in case you guys don't
with
know
Y
Combinator. Yeah.
Y Combinator, which is like a startup accelerator. And
or like the startup accelerator, probably.
Which is the startup accelerator, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the reason why startup accelerators
sorry
exist. Yeah, thanks. No, that was definitely like a super cool experience to go through that, which is like it's essentially a 3-month program where you are in sort of a batch with a bunch of other companies that are doing cool things, and you have multiple events a week where there's interesting people coming to talk about their startup journey. So we had like the founders of Airbnb come over and talk about both how they got started and also sort of how they handled the whole past years of their business, and the same for a bunch of other interesting companies that have also gone through Y Combinator, so like Airbnb and like Stripe and also OpenSea. So those that has been super interesting to go through. And so that so up until probably like a month ago, that's what I mainly was spending my time on.
What was that idea? What was that?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Good question. Thanks. Yeah, that's so we were essentially building. So we're building this company called ChainGrab, which was essentially an API that explains what happens in transactions. So if you have these complex smart contract transactions, there's a lot of different things that can happen inside those kinds of transactions. So it can be like a token swap, or it can be an NFT sale, or like an NFT mint, those kinds of things. And so what we did is we would take this transaction and just try to tell you as much as we can about this transaction. So if it's an NFT sale, like who sold it, who bought it, how much, those kinds of things. And then we also offered a sort of a simulation service. So essentially you can simulate what the effects would be of a certain transaction, and you would get like the same results back. So like, hey, if you sign this transaction, essentially, this is what's going to happen. Like, you're going to buy an NFT, or you're going to approve a huge allowance. And the idea was that kind of APIs could be integrated into like wallets and portfolio management software, or like any kind of thing dealing with transaction data. But unfortunately, that didn't really pan out, as my co-founder and I ended up splitting up. I ended up saying, I'm gonna go my own way. Gonna do my own thing. So that's definitely not the ideal situation for anyone involved, and definitely not sort of what the plan is when you go into that whole startup and you go through Y Combinator. But Marwan is doing some really interesting things right now, and I think I'm doing interesting things right now. So I think we're both pretty all right with the way everything panned out. But yeah, so that's sort of what I've been doing the past half year, maybe a bit longer. And so then for the past month, I've been sort of like taking a step back and trying to figure out, what is next, what I am going to do. And in that time, I've been working a bunch more on Revoke, which actually has been getting a lot of traction in the past year. So it's really nice to see that being used by a lot of different people. And then, also in that time, I launched this browser extension, which is also something that we actually already talked about during ChainGrab, as something that we could do. So then, when that didn't end up happening, I figured, this idea is definitely something that needs to be done, or needs to happen. So then I'll just do it under the sort of Revoke umbrella rather than the ChainGrab umbrella. And yeah, that has also seen like a lot of great response. So we have over like almost 9,000 active users now of the extension in just over a month. And and I'm still sort of keeping up development with that. There's still plenty of things that need to be added to the extension, and also to the Revoke website.
Do you use a framework or something that spits out a Firefox and a Chrome extension, or are you writing both of them?
So fortunately, most of the code is the same for like these extensions, and actually Mozilla provides like a polyfill, so like sort of a wrapper around what Firefox Firefox's API is and what Chrome's API is. So you can use their library to make basically your your extension compatible with both, and then there's still a few minor tweaks that you need to do on either side. But essentially, I now have just a build Firefox and a build Chrome command that spits out a Firefox version and a Chrome version. And of course, the Chrome version works with like Brave and all the sort of Chromium-based browsers. I also briefly looked at Safari, but they are doing something completely different. And I noticed that even MetaMask doesn't have a Safari version. So I figured if they don't do it, I should be good, ignoring Safari. Yeah, but it's definitely been a cool experience building extensions as well.
Got it.
Very nice.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. So it sounds like you're doing a lot of amazing things, and it sounds like right now you're kind of in seeing what's up next mode. So if anybody out there vibes with Rosco and says that you want to make him some amazing job offer, reach out to him. And of course, if you want to work in the Avalanche ecosystem, I think you have a couple guys here who can plug you in. So let us know, let us know what you need. Yeah, it's been great having you on, man. I'm super grateful for you. I'm taking the time. Do you want to let people know how they can find you online?
Yeah, sounds good. So best way is Twitter at Rosco Kalis. And there's also Twitter for Revoke.Cash, which is at Revoke.Cash.
Spell your Twitter, just so people are clear, because there's listeners, audio only version. How do you spell your Twitter handle?
So that's ROSCOKALIS.
Got it. And what's up with your NFT launch? Are you guys still doing that?
Right. We didn't even touch upon that. So yeah, it's I think you mentioned this way at the start of the podcast. Yeah, so my dad is a physical artist, like a traditional artist, let's say, and with sort of this whole NFT boom that we've seen in the past year, also around like digital arts, I figured it could be interesting for him and me to work together on sort of an NFT project, which we did, and that was like a lot of fun, like working together, and sort of we would have these weekly or monthly, depending on how we're feeling, meetings where he would come over and he would have like this whole binder, this whole sort of folder full of paper cuttings that he would like be arranging on the table to make like art out of that. And then I would be on the side programming whatever he was doing into sort of like generative art algorithms. So basically I built this code that can generate an unlimited number of artworks, like procedurally, that is sort of based on the rules that he uses for his own like physical work and the way that looks. And so in last May, we actually did the NFT launch for that on Art Blocks, which is like one of the biggest generative arts NFT platform, which went well. So now if you guys are into generative art and NFTs at all, that NFT is also launched and can be bought on OpenSea. It's called Imperfections by Kalis.
Yeah, we'll share the links and everything in the description. So whatever you want to share, we'll definitely make sure people have access.
Yeah, cool. So that's that has been a lot of fun as well. Also just to work together with my dad on that, right? Sort of have that have that project that we can sort of both put our energy into and work together on. Yeah.
Amazing, dude. Really great journey. Connor, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, it was a pleasure having you on. It was great getting to connect the author with the work, and yeah, great getting to meet you.
Yeah, when your next project comes into focus, man, let us know. You're welcome back anytime. So just let us know if you want to come back on and show something or just kick it. You're welcome anytime.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having us, guys.
Yeah. Connor, if anybody wants to find you online, how would they do so?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm Das_Connor, DAS_CONNOR.
All right. Cool. Well, another amazing episode, you guys. Thank you for joining us. If you made it this far, of course, you're an absolute champion. We will be back next week. So Monday is Labor Day, which is a US holiday, but this will still be going live on Monday. So, you'll still see this at the same time. We'll be back next Thursday with another amazing guest. You can find me on Twitter at CG Cardona. That's CGCARDONA. Pardon me. So please go out and follow us on Twitter. If you like this, like, subscribe, share it with your friends. We're always trying to grow the ecosystem. If you guys know of anybody who we should be interviewing, please reach out and introduce us to all the amazing people, because there's so many amazing people to know. And so it helps if you have an idea of somebody you would like to see on the show, that you actually, make the introduction to myself or Connor. Just tag us on a tweet or tag us on Telegram or something like that. I'm always wanting to meet more people. So I think that's it. So I think we'll be back next week. Anything else? No, I guess so. We'll sign out from Snowflake to Avalanche and through consensus to the stars. Thank you so much, everybody. Peace.
Bye.